Sometimes I love being wrong. And I was wrong about Texas on Saturday. You see, I had predicted that Texas would only win by 20 points against the Florida Gators. But I was wrong about that. They ended up covering the spread and winning by a whopping 32 points, winning by a margin 49-17. Texas looked great against the Gators at home. Quinn Ewers had an amazing 5 touchdowns, 333 yards passing. He looked like the Quinn Ewers at the start of the season. Texas has to be feeling good about what comes next because they control their own destiny. Because if the Longhorns win out, they are in the SEC title game in Atlanta. It's as simple as that. Now, what is not as simple is the schedule coming up. We've got a tough game at Arkansas, our ancient enemy from the old days of the Southwest Conference. We've got what could be a grinded out game at home against Kentucky, and then the big one on the road in College Station against Texas A&M. So the Horns have their work cut out for them, but they control their own destiny, and that is a beautiful thing. I also like the defense quite a bit on Saturday, and I know I get some commenters here and there saying that there's nothing ever been wrong with this defense. I politely disagree. What we saw Saturday was a much improved game plan defensively. They harassed, they blitzed, they disguised their coverage, and you couldn't really ever tell what they were going to do next. It wasn't just sitting in a soft zone all game. The Horns were flying all over the place, and it showed. And I'm not saying that the soft zone is always a bad thing. Sometimes there is a place and a time for it. All I'm saying is the Horns look so much better when they mixed up their defensive coverage. Now, on to the greater point and the title of this video, at least technically speaking. And I think this is becoming more and more apparent to college football fans everywhere. You look at the SEC, you look at the Big Ten, you look at the standings right now as we go into the home stretch of the season. Conference semifinal games are inevitable. They're inevitable. Once you get a conference up to about 16, and certainly once you get above 16, it is almost impossible to get a clear-cut 1 and 2. There's always going to be some talk, some controversy at the end of the season saying, well, you know what, I think 3 is actually better, or maybe 4 deserves a chance in the game. I think this season, and probably the next season as well, is going to lead to that groundswell of support for conference semifinal games, at least in the SEC and the Big Ten. And let's be honest, these games would make a boatload of money. They would bring in a ton of advertisers. So I think it's now an inevitability, at least for the Power 2, that starting probably somewhere in 2026 or shortly thereafter, we're going to see conference semifinal games in the SEC and the Big Ten. For the SEC, obviously Alabama is sitting pretty. They have to be very, very happy with themselves at this point. They are now back in the hunt for the SEC title game. Georgia Bulldogs, who looked invincible just 2 or 3 weeks ago, now suddenly have fallen back down to earth. A lot of people in a sense of puzzlement, wondering like in a stupor what happened to Georgia. Can the Bulldogs recover? Can they pull out of the tailspin they have put themselves into? Well, we're going to find out. They've got a big game against Tennessee coming up, and that is certainly a playoff elimination game. If Georgia wants to accomplish anything at all this season, they simply have to beat the Volunteers. There's no other way around it. Tennessee, on the other hand, another team that controls its own destiny. If they win out, they are in a spot in the championship game in Atlanta. And I say it all the time, but it really is true. Week 11 was outstanding. This season of college football has been outstanding. I find myself simply watching the SEC all day Saturday. I don't even need to watch another conference. It's that good. I think Big Ten fans probably feel the same way. It's just incredible what this 12-team format has done for the game. And I was probably the biggest skeptic of them all going into the season, but what can I say? I'm a believer because it has revolutionized the game in such a wonderful way. This is Kevin saying God bless you, hook 'em horns, and stay tuned for SEC Power Rankings for Week 12.